Thank you for that introduction, and a big thank you to Dennis and London College of Fashion for having me. It's really an honour to be here and get to speak to all of you. As Rochelle mentioned, I'm Ade Hassan. I'm the founder of Nubian Skin. And I think for some of you in the room, finding a nude pair of tights or a nude bra or maybe even a nude dress is something that's very, very easy. But for a lot of women of colour, so black women, Asian women, mixed race women, etc., it's something that's been a problem. And I created Nubian Skin to help fix that. Now, before I get ahead of myself, I'll rewind a little bit. Around 5 years ago, I was working a corporate job on a consulting project which I hated, with a manager who had taken a strong disliking to me. I was bored, frustrated, and unhappy, but all of these things are an excellent motivator when you're trying to figure out what you want to do next. The truth was, I'd always wanted to be an entrepreneur. I knew I wanted it to be in fashion, but I didn't want to do clothing. And I had a few ideas that I'd been working on, but nothing was sticking. And after years of being annoyed of never being able to find the right pair of tights in my color, or asking for a nude bra and somebody handing me something which might as well have been neon green because it didn't match my skin tone, I decided that this was an idea that could work. And I remember I shot off a text to one of my best friends saying, I figured out what I want to do when I grow up. And that was the start. I realized pretty quickly that I was going to need to save some serious money. So I decided to leave consulting and go back into finance, which was something that I'd done previously. So by the end of that year, I had a swanky new job in finance, bought myself an iPad, I bought myself some lovely designer dresses, some great shoes, and I thought, you know, it's fine, I've got a few years to save money. My mum, on the other hand, never forgot that I told her about this idea, and she was very, very keen to get her hands on some tights that fit her color. So let's move ahead another year to 2012, and that was the year of the Olympics. So I was in New York for work, and I shared the idea with my close friend Mira, and she thought it was brilliant. And I remember having a conversation with my friend Chris then, talking about how hard it was to save money, and she was not very sympathetic. She invited me over to the apartment that she was staying at the time, which belonged to one of her old bosses. And she showed me this woman's walk-in closet, which was the most ridiculous walk-in closet you could imagine. And the pinnacle was this shoe wardrobe, which had like rows of Louis Vuittons and, you know, Jimmy Choos, etc. And then Chris slams the door in my face and says, "You're never going to have that." And I was like, why would anybody do that? And she was like, "You don't save, so you're not going to have that, and you're not going to be able to start a business." That was the kick that I needed to get serious about saving. I returned to London later that summer with a renewed vigor about Nubian Skin, but work became hectic, and my mum kept telling me, you're not focused on this, what's happening with the business? And I let her know that I was very busy with work. In May 2013, I received a late birthday card from my friend Mira, and across the front it said, "It's time to start living the life you've always imagined." Inside was a really lovely message about how she thought my idea was amazing and how one day she hoped to see my picture on Forbes magazine. The next day, I registered the company and applied for the trademark and started reaching out to manufacturers. From that moment on, I couldn't stop thinking about it. I slept with a notebook beside my bed because I'd wake up at 3 a.m. with different ideas about colors or the photo shoot that I wanted. And I felt like I'd become obsessed, but it was wonderful. And with that came my first major hurdle. Not one manufacturer that I reached out to came back to me. Nobody was really interested in doing something for a small company that was looking at doing a niche product. They were hard enough to find in the first place and almost impossible to contact. As someone who didn't have a background in fashion, because my background was very corporate, it wasn't in the fashion industry at all, and I definitely had no leads in the lingerie industry, I realized pretty quickly that I was going to need some expert knowledge. So I found a consultant via Google who specialized in the lingerie industry. I drew up a confidentiality agreement because I was really protective about my idea and met up with her to discuss it. To this day, I think the money that I spent on the consultant, which seemed like a lot at the time, was the best thing that I've ever done and the best money that I've ever spent. She suggested that I go to a big lingerie trade show and I'd be sure to meet manufacturers, and she was right, I did. All of a sudden, my idea went from being in my head to something that was going to become a reality. I won't bore you with all the details about the research and the development and coming up with the colours, but it's pretty amazing to see something that's been in your head come to life. Fast forward a few more months, and I'd just come back from visiting China. And if you are if you're going to be producing anywhere, I definitely suggest visiting, first of all, to check on your product, but also just from an ethical perspective, because I think that's incredibly important. And then I started focusing on the photo shoot, because at this point, I planned for Nubian Skin to only be in e-commerce. And once I knew what I wanted to do, I picked the models. It was an amazing, amazing, amazing shoot. And I have to say, that brings me to my first point. Make sure your imagery is top-notch. It's the first thing anybody's going to see about your brand, so you have to make it count. And that doesn't mean you need to spend lots of money, because I didn't. It was me, a photographer, a makeup artist, our models, and an intern. I did all the styling myself, but the images were everything. After the shoot, that's when interesting things began to happen. I had no marketing budget, and I didn't have a marketing plan, and that's something that's a very bad idea, so I do not recommend anybody starting a business that way. In hindsight, I have no idea how I actually thought people would hear about the business. But I had an Instagram account, which had about 50 followers, mostly friends, and I had a Twitter account, which had 10 followers, again, mostly friends. After the photo shoot, I put an image of the 4 girls in our lingerie on Instagram, and I went off on a week's holiday. About halfway through the holiday, my phone started buzzing incessantly, and I looked at Instagram and I had 100 followers. Now for me, that was a massive, massive deal. 100 people cared about my product. By the end of the holiday, we had 1,000 followers, and in 4 weeks, we had 20,000. I couldn't look at my phone or open an email without getting butterflies in my stomach. The image had gone viral, and that's the image up there. I didn't really understand what going viral meant until that happened. One morning I wake up and BuzzFeed had done an article about our brand saying we were redefining nude. Then The Independent and the Mail Online sent emails asking us for high-resolution images and credits. Then Tandy Newton tweeted about us, and Kerry Washington retweeted an article about us, and our followers kept growing. This leads me to point 2, get the word out. I don't have a formula for it, because for me it honestly feels like it happened by magic. But make sure people are talking about your idea. We don't advertise because we can't afford to, but social media is an amazing leveler. I couldn't have paid for the publicity that Twitter and Instagram gave us, so please use them. Lack of experience isn't really an excuse, because I didn't have an Instagram account or a Twitter account before I started Nubian Skin. And you don't need to pay somebody to manage it for you, because at first I was doing it all myself. Now, all of this happened in August and early September of 2014, and we didn't actually have a product yet, and our e-commerce site wasn't live, but it was just a blog, and we kept people updated on what was happening, and we sort of were teasing them with more images and more details about what we were going to do. Then one morning, I wake up, and I open my email, and there's an email from the head of buying at ASOS for women's wear. And at that point, I didn't really grasp how important it was until I started speaking to people in the industry. And all of a sudden, I had to rethink my strategy about only being direct to consumer. So I had to think about my pricing structure, what it meant to supply wholesale, how that fit into what I was planning on doing, and what it meant to supply in bulk. The best piece of advice that I could give anybody who's trying to get into retailers is to think big and be professional. And to do that, I honestly think attending trade shows is paramount. I would argue that spending money on advertising and PR shouldn't even be a thought if you can't afford to go to a trade show. If you're trying to convince retailers, both big and small, that they should be investing into your brand, then you need to show that you're legit and serious about your business. And the way to do that is to get alongside the big boys. Our first trade show was at Salon International de la Lingerie in Paris. We didn't have any appointments, but we were there. It was a relatively quiet moment, and 2 ladies walked up to the stand. And at that point, I was pretty bored, and so I started talking, just monologuing about the brand, not really paying attention. And then I stopped myself, and I said, "I'm so sorry, I'm really rude. You have American accents, where are you from?" At that point, they told me that they were the intimate apparel buyers from Nordstrom, and my stomach dropped. Now, I don't know if you've heard about Nordstrom, but Nordstrom is basically like the John Lewis of, or slightly even better, of the US. And in 6 months, we were in their stores, and that changed the game for us. It meant that people were seeing us as a real player in the market. And I never let on that we were tiny, that we were a 2-person team, although now we have an intern, so we're 3. And I said yes to everything. And then later went on to figure out what exactly that meant. Which again, I wouldn't necessarily say going with that speed with things, but it is important if there is an opportunity to go after it and seize it. Working with retailers is really tough. They take a long time to pay, and they're really hard on you. But they can alter the sustainability of your business significantly. Now, before you think that we've gained all of our stockists by them approaching us, unfortunately, it doesn't work that way, which brings me to my final point, which is chase what you want. It's very unlikely that retailers will approach you, so you need to approach them and use any resources available to you to track down who the buyers are. Ask them for a meeting, send an email, introduce your brand, just get on their radar. And it's fine if they say no, just keep approaching them season after season after season. If you have contacts who are stocked with a retailer who you might be interested in, don't be shy about asking for email addresses. And let them know that you're going to be at a trade show if you think they're going to be there. If you have a showroom, or ask if you can come in for a meeting. If you can afford it, agents and distributors can be effective, but I would definitely reiterate that anything you can do by yourself, try it, and try and save money, because that will really help you down in the long run. So I think I've taken enough of your time, but I'll reiterate my advice. Killer imagery, get the word out, and use social media to your advantage. Think big and be professional, and finally, chase what you want. Thank you so much.